December 2nd, 1993. A phone call lasting less than 1 minute changed everything. The world's most wanted drug lord was about to fall. But here's what they don't teach you in documentaries. His death didn't end the cocaine wars. It started the deadliest chapter yet. 2 cartels, one industry worth $30 billion, and a battle for control that would reshape the global drug trade forever. This is the untold story of Pablo Escobar versus the Cali Cartel. Medellin, Colombia, late 1980s. Pablo Escobar wasn't just a criminal. According to Forbes magazine, he was the 7th richest person in the world, with an estimated net worth of $30 billion. His Medellin cartel reportedly controlled 80% of the cocaine entering the United States during its peak, according to DEA estimates. But while Pablo made headlines, 4 businessmen in Cali were quietly building something different. The Rodriguez Orjuela brothers, Gilberto and Miguel, along with Jose Santa Cruz Lindoño and Hailmer Herrera. They ran the Cali Cartel, and they operated like a multinational corporation. While the Medellin cartel used violence and intimidation, the Cali Cartel used legitimate businesses as fronts: drugstores, radio stations, even a professional soccer team. According to U.S. Department of Justice reports, they pioneered sophisticated money laundering techniques that are still studied by law enforcement today. Their strategy was simple: stay invisible, stay rich, and let Pablo take the heat. Here's where the story gets fascinating. The Medellin and Cali cartels represented 2 completely different philosophies of organized crime. Pablo Escobar's approach was confrontational. According to documented reports, his organization was linked to the assassinations of presidential candidates, judges, and police officers throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. His strategy was fear-based control. The Cali Cartel? They invested in intelligence. According to investigative journalism from that era, they allegedly accessed telephone company records, giving them advanced knowledge of law enforcement operations. They didn't fight the system, they infiltrated it. By 1990, according to U.S. congressional testimony, the Cali Cartel had established distribution networks in over 20 countries, including partnerships with criminal organizations in Mexico, Italy, and Russia. They were building a global empire while Pablo was fighting a local war. And that difference would determine everything. Early 1990s, the Colombian government was desperate. Pablo Escobar's campaign of terror had destabilized the entire nation. Bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings had become routine. According to multiple sources, including former Colombian officials, the Cali Cartel approached the government with a proposal: intelligence sharing in exchange for reduced scrutiny of their own operations. It was a controversial alliance. The government needed help tracking Escobar. The Cali Cartel wanted their biggest competitor eliminated. According to DEA reports from that period, intelligence about Escobar's movements increasingly came from anonymous sources, many of which were later traced back to Cali. They also allegedly funded a vigilante group called Los Pepes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. According to journalist Mark Bowden's extensively researched book, Killing Pablo, Los Pepes systematically targeted Escobar's support network, his properties, and his associates. Pablo Escobar, once untouchable, suddenly found himself surrounded by enemies on all sides. December 2nd, 1993. After 16 months as a fugitive, Pablo Escobar was located in a middle-class Medellin neighborhood. According to official reports, Colombian search block forces tracked him through radio triangulation while he was making a phone call. He was killed in the ensuing confrontation. He was 44 years old. The world celebrated. News headlines declared victory in the war on drugs. But according to DEA intelligence assessments from 1994, the Cali Cartel immediately expanded operations into territories formerly controlled by Medellin. Within months, according to U.S. law enforcement estimates, the Cali Cartel controlled approximately 80% of the world's cocaine supply. They had won, not through violence, but through patience and strategic intelligence. But their victory would be short-lived. Because by eliminating Pablo, they'd revealed just how powerful and organized they really were. And that put them directly in the crosshairs of international law enforcement. 1994 became the Cali Cartel's peak year. According to U.S. Justice Department documents, they were moving an estimated 700 to 900 tons of cocaine annually through sophisticated distribution networks. But here's what made them different from previous cartels: legitimacy. According to financial investigations, the Rodriguez-Orjuela brothers owned hundreds of legitimate businesses throughout Colombia. They were respected in Cali's business community. They sponsored cultural events and sports teams. According to later testimony, they had also allegedly made significant financial contributions to political campaigns, including the 1994 Colombian presidential election, a scandal that would later be known as Proceso 8000. They believed they were untouchable. They believed their money and influence had made them immune to prosecution, but they were wrong. If you're finding this story fascinating, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Do you think the Cali Cartel was smarter than Pablo Escobar or just luckier? I want to hear your perspective. 1994. The same year the Cali Cartel reached its peak was also the year their empire began to crack. Joe Toft, the DEA's chief in Colombia, publicly accused the newly elected Colombian government of accepting drug money. According to news reports from that time, this sparked an international scandal that couldn't be ignored. The Colombian government, facing pressure from the United States, launched Operation Cornerstone. According to official records, this was a coordinated effort between Colombian National Police and U.S. DEA agents specifically targeting the Cali Cartel's leadership. In June 1995, Gilberto Rodriguez Orjuela was arrested. According to police reports, he was found hiding in a concealed closet in one of his properties. 3 months later, his brother Miguel was also arrested. Unlike Pablo's dramatic rooftop death, the Cali leaders were captured quietly. But the impact was just as devastating to their organization. Between 1995 and 1998, Colombian authorities systematically dismantled the Cali Cartel's leadership structure. José Santa Cruz Londoño escaped from prison in 1996, but was killed in a police operation just 5 months later, according to official Colombian police reports. Helmer Herrera was arrested and later died in prison in 1998 under circumstances that remain controversial. According to court documents, both Gilberto and Miguel Rodriguez Orjuela eventually cooperated with authorities in exchange for reduced sentences. They served time in both Colombian and U.S. prisons before being released in the 2000s. But here's the critical question. Did their arrest end the cocaine trade? According to DEA reports from that era, cocaine seizures actually increased in the late 1990s. New organizations simply filled the vacuum. So what actually happened after the fall of both the Medellin and Cali cartels? According to drug policy research, the cocaine trade didn't decrease, it fragmented. Smaller Colombian cartels emerged, but more significantly, Mexican criminal organizations gained control of trafficking routes into the United States. Today, according to current DEA assessments, Mexican cartels dominate cocaine distribution to North America. The Sinaloa Cartel and Jalisco New Generation Cartel move more cocaine than the Colombian cartels ever did. The war didn't end, it just moved and evolved. According to academic research on drug policy, this pattern represents what experts call the Hydra effect. Cut off one head, and multiple new ones emerge. The focus on supply-side enforcement without addressing demand creates an endless cycle. Behind the statistics and strategies were real consequences for real people. According to Colombia's National Center for Historical Memory, the period between 1980 and 2000 saw over 200,000 conflict-related deaths in Colombia, many linked to drug trafficking violence. Communities were torn apart, families were destroyed, an entire generation grew up surrounded by violence and corruption. The psychological and social impact extended far beyond those directly involved in the drug trade. According to public health research, cocaine addiction in the United States during this period affected millions of families, with consequences that rippled through communities for decades. The cocaine wars weren't just about cartels fighting for territory. They represented a massive public health crisis, a corruption of democratic institutions, and a humanitarian tragedy that affected 2 continents. Today, Pablo Escobar has been romanticized in popular culture. Netflix series, tour in Medellin, even themed merchandise. But according to survivors and victims' families interviewed by journalists, this romanticization is deeply painful. The Cali Cartel receives less attention in popular media, partly because their methods were less dramatic. But according to law enforcement analysis, their corruption of institutions may have caused longer-lasting damage than Escobar's violence. They proved that organized crime could operate at the highest levels of business and government while maintaining a respectable facade. According to criminology research, this model has been replicated by criminal organizations worldwide. The real legacy isn't their wealth or power. It's the blueprint they created for integrating criminal enterprises into legitimate society. Perhaps the most damaging legacy of this era was institutional corruption. According to the Proceso 8000 investigation, the 1994 Colombian presidential campaign of Ernesto Samper received millions in contributions from the Cali Cartel. While Samper denied knowledge, the scandal exposed how deeply drug money had penetrated Colombian politics. According to academic research on corruption, this wasn't limited to politics. The judicial system, law enforcement, and even military institutions were compromised. Trust in government institutions eroded dramatically during this period. Colombia has spent the past 3 decades working to rebuild these institutions. According to current assessments by international observers, significant progress has been made, but the scars remain. What happened to the children of this conflict? Both the children of cartel leaders and the children of their victims. Sebastián Mariquin, Pablo Escobar's son who changed his name from Juan Pablo Escobar, became an architect and public speaker. According to his published works and interviews, he has spent years apologizing to victims and advocating against violence. The children of Cali cartel leaders have largely remained private. According to limited reporting, many live quietly under different circumstances than their parents. But there's a larger generation affected, the millions of young Colombians who grew up during this violence. According to sociological research, this generation experienced significant trauma that influenced Colombia's development for decades. Let's talk about the economics. According to research by economists studying illicit markets, at their peak, the Colombian cartels were generating an estimated $5 to $7 billion annually in revenue. But according to Colombian economic historians, drug money also distorted the country's legitimate economy. It inflated real estate prices, corrupted financial institutions, and created artificial economic bubbles that later collapsed. The challenge of narco money laundering affected countries worldwide. According to financial crime experts, techniques developed by the Cali cartel for laundering drug proceeds are still used by criminal organizations today. Colombia's economy has diversified significantly since the 1990s. According to current World Bank data, the country has developed strong sectors in technology, tourism, and agriculture. But the economic legacy of the cartel era still influences certain regions. Here's the perspective often missing from cartel stories: demand. According to U.S. substance abuse statistics, cocaine use in the United States peaked in the 1980s and early 1990s, exactly when these cartels were most powerful. The cartels didn't create demand, they supplied existing demand. According to public health research, addressing drug trafficking without addressing addiction treatment and prevention creates an endless cycle. As long as demand exists, supply will find a way. Current drug policy debates, according to academic research, increasingly focus on harm reduction and treatment rather than purely enforcement-based approaches. Some experts argue this represents learning from the failures of the war on drugs era. When Colombian cartels fell, Mexican organizations ascended, but this wasn't accidental. According to DEA historical assessments, Mexican trafficking organizations had been partners with Colombian cartels since the 1980s, initially just transporting cocaine across the U.S. border. But according to law enforcement analysis, as Colombian cartels weakened in the late 1990s, Mexican organizations negotiated for ownership of the cocaine rather than just transportation fees. This shift fundamentally changed the power dynamics. Today, according to current DEA reports, Mexican cartels control the majority of cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl entering the United States. The problem didn't go away. It evolved and intensified. Despite its dark history, Colombia has undergone remarkable transformation. According to international tourism statistics, Colombia is now one of South America's top tourist destinations. Cities like Medellin and Bogotá are recognized for innovation and culture. According to peace process documentation, Colombia signed a historic peace agreement with FARC guerrillas in 2016, formally ending a 52-year internal conflict that had been intertwined with drug trafficking. Medellin, once called the world's most dangerous city, received international awards for urban innovation. According to crime statistics, violence has decreased dramatically since the 1990s. But according to Colombian researchers, the country still faces challenges with smaller criminal organizations and coca cultivation. The transformation is real but incomplete. The methods used to eventually capture cartel leaders represented an evolution in law enforcement. According to declassified documents and journalistic accounts, the combination of signals intelligence, informant networks, and international cooperation proved more effective than traditional policing alone. The techniques developed during this era, phone tracking, financial investigation, international coordination, according to law enforcement experts, became standard practice for combating transnational organized crime. However, according to civil liberties organizations, some of these surveillance methods also raised concerns about privacy and due process that remain relevant today. The cartel wars affected women in complex ways that are often overlooked. According to journalistic investigations, women served as accountants, money launderers, and sometimes leaders within these organizations. They weren't just bystanders. But according to human rights documentation, women also suffered disproportionately as victims, widows of violence, single mothers left in poverty, and communities without male family members. Maria Victoria Henao, Pablo Escobar's widow, according to court records, faced legal proceedings for money laundering decades after her husband's death, demonstrating the long-lasting legal consequences for families. According to Colombian women's organizations, rebuilding after the violence required addressing gender-specific impacts including displacement, economic hardship, and trauma. Telling the truth during this era came with deadly consequences. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, Colombia was one of the world's most dangerous countries for reporters during the 1980s and 1990s. Journalists investigating cartels faced intimidation, threats, and violence. According to documented cases, several prominent Colombian journalists were killed while reporting on drug trafficking and corruption. Their work, however, eventually helped expose the full extent of cartel operations. International journalists like Mark Bowden-Later brought these stories to global audiences through extensively researched books and articles, helping ensure the history wouldn't be forgotten or romanticized. For law enforcement officials, this era represented unprecedented challenges. According to interviews with retired DEA and Colombian police officials, they faced adversaries with virtually unlimited financial resources, sophisticated technology, and networks spanning continents. According to law enforcement accounts, officers faced the constant threat of plata o plomo, silver or lead, meaning accept bribes or face assassination. Many chose integrity despite the risks. According to official records, hundreds of Colombian police officers died fighting drug cartels during this period. Their sacrifice is often overlooked in cartel narratives focused on criminals. The cocaine wars sparked lasting debates about drug policy. According to policy research, some experts argue the enforcement-focused approach of that era was counterproductive, creating violence without reducing drug availability. Other experts, according to published research, argue that dismantling major cartels, while not ending drug trafficking, prevented these organizations from becoming even more powerful threats to state stability. According to current drug policy analysis, many countries are now experimenting with different approaches, from decriminalization of possession to harm reduction programs, representing a shift from the purely enforcement-based strategies of the cartel era. The Colombian cartel wars had ripple effects worldwide. According to international relations research, these organizations established trafficking routes and relationships that connected South America, Central America, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, and beyond. According to financial crime analysis, money laundering techniques developed during this era affected banking regulations globally. International financial institutions implemented new compliance requirements specifically because of cartel money flows. According to current law enforcement assessments, the organizational models pioneered by these cartels influenced criminal organizations in other countries and other criminal enterprises beyond drug trafficking. Even decades later, mysteries remain. According to investigative reports, the full extent of Pablo Escobar's hidden wealth has never been recovered. Estimates suggest hundreds of millions remain buried or hidden. According to financial investigations, the Cali Cartel successfully laundered billions through legitimate businesses, money that was never fully traced or seized. And according to corruption investigations, the full network of officials who cooperated with cartels was never completely exposed. Some individuals likely escaped accountability. These unanswered questions remind us that this history, while extensively documented, still contains hidden chapters. So what can we learn from this history? According to criminology research, several patterns emerge. Criminal organizations adapt and evolve faster than enforcement strategies. Focusing only on leadership without addressing underlying conditions creates cycles of violence. Corruption of institutions causes longer-lasting damage than even large-scale violence. According to public health research, treating drug abuse as primarily a criminal justice issue rather than a public health issue has significant costs and limited effectiveness. And according to economic research, the enormous profits from drug trafficking will continue to attract new organizations as long as prohibition maintains artificial price inflation. Before we conclude, if you've made it this far, you're clearly interested in understanding the real history behind the headlines. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I research and present these complex stories so you understand what really happened, not just the Hollywood version. Drop a comment telling me what topic I should cover next. It's been over 30 years since Pablo Escobar's death, almost 30 years since the Cali Cartel leaders were arrested. According to current drug policy analysis, global cocaine production has actually increased. According to United Nations data, coca cultivation reached record levels in recent years. According to law enforcement reports, criminal organizations today are more fragmented but collectively more powerful than the cartels of the 1990s. The cocaine wars didn't end, they transformed. New players emerged, new routes developed, new methods evolved. But there's also hope. According to development indicators, Colombia has made remarkable progress in reducing violence and strengthening institutions. International cooperation on drug policy has improved. Treatment approaches have advanced significantly. The question isn't whether the Medellin or Cali approach was smarter. The The question is whether we've learned enough from that era to break the cycle. According to historians studying this period, the key lesson might be this: you cannot arrest or kill your way out of a problem driven by demand, poverty, and institutional weakness. Sustainable solutions require addressing root causes, not just symptoms. The story of Pablo Escobar versus the Cali Cartel isn't really about cocaine cartels. It's about power, corruption, addiction, poverty, and the complex consequences when all of these intersect. It's about how violence creates cycles that last generations, how corruption undermines democracy, how illegal markets distort entire economies, and how enforcement without addressing underlying causes creates endless conflict. According to those who lived through this era, victims, survivors, reformed participants, the greatest tragedy is how much suffering could have been prevented with different choices at every level. Today, new generations face similar challenges with different drugs and different organizations. The fundamental dynamics, according to experts, remain remarkably similar. The cocaine wars weren't entertainment, though they've been packaged that way. They were and are real human tragedy with real consequences that continue today. Understanding this history accurately, completely, honestly is the first step toward not repeating it.